Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. This is Theater Resources Unlimited. It's our True Talks About Theater. It's our weekly community gathering where we bring people in to feel a little less isolated. We started doing this April 17th, 2020. I just remind people every time we do this, I remind them because we just went through a lot. I mean, 2.5 years of quarantine and shutdown was a major cultural and just social shift for all of us. It's amazing that we got through it, and here we are now. We're coming out of COVID to some degree. I mean, we're not all masking, but I think most of us, if not all of us, are vaxxed, which is smart. So I started doing this because I didn't want to shut my company, I guess. I just wanted to keep going somehow. So I sort of said, well, I've got a couple of really big live events coming up, and unless something happens and shutdown only lasts like 3 or 4 weeks, I may have to make alternate plans. So you all remember how that went? Remember how we thought it was going to be like a couple weeks, and that was going to be Memorial Day, and then I think Trump made us think that maybe 4th of July was going to be the time we're going to come back to life, and then it was going to be September. So 2.5 years later, we've learned that life basically takes its own route. It doesn't do what we tell it to do, or hope that it will do. But it's our job, being here on the planet, to adapt and adjust and make the best of what we have. And so I was told about something called Zoom. Anybody hear of Zoom? So I said, what is Zoom? And they told me about Zoom was, and I said, oh, I can't do that. And they said, yes, you can. Long story short, yes, I could. So I opened up the room for people to come in and talk and be together and have a community during a period of isolation. And now 2.5 years later, here we are. I'm still doing this. Just for those of you who are counting, it's my 135th consecutive week of doing community gatherings. That's a stretch because there was a Christmas and a New Year's that we didn't do, so it wasn't exactly consecutive, but you get the idea, right? So our conversations have changed a little. They've morphed from really how to cope to how to move forward. So now we're in how to move forward mode. And I've got a couple guests today who are part of very well-respected and very successful theater companies, and one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, because I'm a playwright and I make things dramatic that way. So we're going to talk about what the journey has been like for both of these theaters. I think they have things in common that they've done, and they've had things that they've done differently as well. I do want to get a little bit into the history of the theaters. I want make sure everybody knows whatever there is to know about Goodspeed and whatever there is to know about La Mirada, the two important, very important regional theaters that we have in our country right now. So I'm going to bring in Donna Lynn Hilton and BT McNicholl, and we're going to start talking a little bit about your histories. As one thing I want to say, Donna, is I know that you're the artistic director, but that's recent.
That is
you started at Good. Can I say the year that you started at Goodspeed?
It feels like it's common knowledge at this point, so yes, you may.
1988.
1988. Yes, I was 12.
You were 12. Okay, now I understand. I couldn't understand it when I read it before. So you have gone through a lot of transitions there. Tell us a little bit about your history at Goodspeed. I think it's probably an interesting story.
Happy to.
BT, by the way, I'm not ignoring you. I'm going to get to you.
No, please, Donna absolutely goes first.
First of all, BT, I have to catch up because when did you go to La Mirada?
I've been here about 6 years. It'll be 7 in May. Yeah. We'll catch up. Okay. But go first because.
Okay. Dear God in heaven. Okay. Well, I love the folks out there. So it's a good place for you to be.
That's what we do. We bring people together.
Yeah. I've been saying since pandemic reopening, if it's not happening at Goodspeed, I literally cannot know about it. There's the rest of it just cannot be a priority. So thank you for having me. It's good to see so many people, a lot of familiar faces and names. So it's great to be here. Yes, I have been at Goodspeed since 1988. I began here as an assistant stage manager on the stage above my head in 1988. And as I like to say, clawed my bloody way to the top. But or if you stay somewhere long enough, apparently you end up running the place. But the true story is I was at ASM for 3 years. I became the production stage manager. I held that job for about 19 years here at the Goodspeed, not at our second stage, the Terrace, but primarily at the Goodspeed. Doing every show that Goodspeed produced in that time. I think that since 1988, I have only not worked on one. There's only one Goodspeed show that I have not worked on, and that was because I had moved the show prior to that to Broadway. So I'm a company girl.
Can I ask which show that was?
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Oh, with KT?
With KT Sullivan, yeah.
KT Sullivan. Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
I just saw
That's
KT.
right.
I just saw her last week.
Oh, how is she? I was asking somebody the other day.
She seemed good. She seemed good.
Good. She's a lovely lady. So yeah, did that for 19 years. And then when Sue Frost, who many people will remember as our really successful associate producer, who left us in 2006 or 2007 and went on to form her own production company, and then Memphis and Come From Away and other great projects have been her product with her partners there. When Sue left Goodspeed, I got kicked upstairs and began producing. And then in February of 2020, Michael Gennaro, our then executive director, shared that he was retiring and that the board had made the decision to split from an executive director model, someone who had administrative and artistic leadership for the organization, to a more traditional regional theater model with an artistic director and a managing director. I said, I'm going to apply for that job. I know this theater, I know that audience, I understand the challenges of this institution as intimately as I think honestly anybody ever has. Not to say that that means I can solve them, but I think I understand them very well, and I sort of feel like it's my obligation to put all of that knowledge and history with the organization to work to address some pretty seismic systemic issues. Threw my hat in the ring, and then the world exploded. So got a call.
Perfect time to get a new job when a pandemic hits.
And what timing! Michael Gennaro has the best timing in the American theater.
How did he know? How did he know?
I don't know. He has a crystal ball somewhere, but and so and in December of 2020 was tapped to take this job. Goodspeed's first artistic director, the first woman to hold executive leadership at Goodspeed Musicals. And we've been, I just celebrated my 2nd anniversary in this chair. And I'm really, really, really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And we'll talk about that later.
Well, I think it's a good, I'm going to turn to my friend BT in a moment about this topic. I think it's very interesting to talk about infrastructure. Remember, we're a group that ostensibly we're interested in producing. I can't say that everybody in the room produces. Some of them reluctantly self-produce, but we're about the business. So I'm very interested in the fact that you had a model where you had a combined manager, general manager, and artistic director, and the light bulb went on and said, wait a second, it might be good to split these two jobs. I want to talk about that a little bit. And I want to move to BT for a second. I know BT, I think you were like among the first people that came to True.
Yeah, that's right. I remember those days.
Wow. And I guess I always knew you as a writer, but also as somebody I thought who had producing chops. Am I misremembering?
I'd done some producing, mostly directing. But I had done some producing early on, and then eventually this opportunity came up, and it's unusual. I don't have Donna Lynn's long history with one space. Few people do to have risen through the ranks, and she didn't claw her way. She got there because she's fantastic in every way. But this is an unusual situation here because it's the only theater that I know of in the country that's like this, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the only theater in the country that is municipally owned and self-produces its own art. So let me explain what that
I can't contradict it. I don't know.
Okay, so in a lot of cases, a city will own a theater, civic auditorium, etc. PAC, and they will rent it to a nonprofit for $1 a year or some nominal fee. And then that nonprofit is responsible for raising the money every year through annual galas and donations and whatnot, and also doing the programming. And that's generally how it works. This is unusual in that the city not only owns the building and deals with the roof if it leaks or the plumbing or whatever, but they also finance all the art in the building. So the city is paying for the microphones, the actors' salaries, the orchestra members, the marketing, the flowers in the lobby, the rehearsal hall. Everything is financed solely by the city, and they've been doing that way for about 45 years now.
So let me ask you:
It's highly unusual.
Is that a double-edged sword, or is it all plus?
Oh, as far as I'm concerned, it's all plus. It's
Okay.
great. There's no board of directors and there's no fundraising.
Okay.
So
that's like a dream.
yeah, it's the holy grail. But but I mean, not to say there isn't oversight. So let me just now go to the other side. There's a city council and there's a city manager, and they will be the first to tell you. They say, look, we don't know. We don't work on plays, but we assume you do, and you can guide us there. And also, and this is the other catch, there's no fundraising, but you're expected to return 80% of the costs of the entire entity, including the building, 80% of them in ticket sales, no donations.
Well, no pressure there.
Right. And yeah, so that's the other side of it. So also, unlike Goodspeed, which obviously does have that, now has that sort of typical model as opposed to when Michael was there, Michael Price. In this position, I am responsible for the business side, all the marketing, all that cost recoupment, staff, all that side, as well as the artistic side. So that's a little unusual. That's the other side of it.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second from a business point of view, from the splitting of the two roles. What are the upside and what's the downside of that? Either one of you want to?
Well, Donna, you speak to that first, because now you've seen both sides of it.
I'll speak to the upside, I guess, which I guess indicates that there was a downside. I think the situation here at Goodspeed was that Michael Price built this incredible institution that a 398 seat theater has to support. And yes, we have an endowment that was built largely from the royalties from Annie, but enormous campus, 40 buildings in 3 towns, our main home is a historic theater that requires a great deal of maintenance and restoration that only seats 398 people who expect magnificent musical theater produced on a postage stamp. So it's
also not the biggest stage in the regions.
No postage stamp. And so the business model is just absurd. It just makes no sense whatsoever. And yet here we are. But I think over the years, all of those pieces just created an institution that really did deserve people putting attention to the business and to the art exclusively. And so it is a seismic shift for the organization, for our board of trustees to have 2 people to communicate with, for our staff to have 2 people to come to with questions. And because we were coming out of the pandemic and dealing with some systemic challenges that existed pre-pandemic, David Bird, our managing director, and I have, for these first 2 years together, any big decision we put our heads together on. Neither one of us makes a big decision without consulting the other one.
When people approach me about running a theater company, a small startup theater company, the logic that I give them, and tell me if you think this is right or not, but this is what I was taught. The reason you split the tasks between a business person and an artistic director is so that somebody can say that costs too much. Try thinking of it a different way. It's an artistic director theoretically has this vision, and they're trying to achieve a vision, And sometimes not all of them. There are artistic directors who also have good business heads, but there are cases where the artistic director doesn't necessarily think about bottom line. I mean, or thinks about it as something that, oh, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think probably that I am an artistic director who has a good business sense. I'm a producer. I'm not a director. I was a producer. And so I bring all that to the table, which I think in this moment, post-pandemic, with some of our big challenges, was part of the reason I got the job, right? That they got both of those in one person.
So BT, how about you?
I think you're probably right about that. I mean, not in every case, but that's probably true what you're saying.
Yeah.
That having a sort of checks and balances in that regard is probably pretty
Checks
true.
and balances, a phrase that we are all longing to have active in our country these days.
Yes, agreed. That's probably true, but I think it's about accountability too. I think if we have I'm sure Donna Lynn's is the same. There's oversight and there's checking in, and the bottom line does count. And I think showrunners in television have a similar kind of job to the they're writers, but they're also producers, and that's not always a skill that you find in one person. So it exists in television. It has since for decades. So I was talking to someone who does that job, and he agreed. He said it's a very unusual combination of skills, but it can exist. And if it's going to be a single person model, it kind of has to exist. And if it's a two-person model, then as Donna Lynn said, we put our heads together. But in cases like mine, it's a very easy conversation to have because it's happening in your head all the time.
The mirror.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been with Mirada?
I'll be here 7 in May, so it's about 6.5.
Okay, so what's your journey been like? I mean, when you took on the role, was it everything you thought it would be, or was it surprising? What was it like? I mean, you were thrown into this job that doesn't seem like anything you had planned on.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, I think Donna's situation might have been slightly different because she'd been there already, but I was new here, and I'm also the first person to take over this position who was not already here for a decade or more. They'd always sort of promoted from within, so I was new to the area, new to the theater. No, it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. When I came here, we found that it had a lot of things to recommend. Obviously, very successful, been here a long time, Tony-nominated venue, theater, but it needed a lot of work on the infrastructure and that sort of thing, resources. One of the first things I did when I got here was I took the staff out for a day-long retreat. And I said, ultimately I said, tell me the things that you'd like to see, done differently. And give me your first, second, and third priorities. And about 80% of it was resources. We want better resources. We want new seats, sound system, you name it. It was all there. And I've spent most of the last 5 years addressing that, and also changing the marketing and whatnot to kick that up a level. But that's what I've spent a lot of my time doing is doing that, while also at the same time, as Donna Lynn can attest, you have to keep your eye on the shows that you're doing and keeping that quality up. So it's I think as we're nearing the end of the infrastructure period, and by the way, COVID was a huge help to that. Boy, what a godsend. I mean, not that I wanted COVID to exist at all, but if it had to exist, we certainly made use of the time.
That was going to be my next question, but okay, go for it.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so it wasn't quite what I expected, but we've managed to do both and make good use of that. So it's you take what you have and then do the job at hand. That's what I say.
Well, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said that the city or the municipality or whatever expects you to return 80% of costs with ticket sales. How? To me, it sounds like there might be a lot of money that you have to bring in.
Yeah, you do. That's literally it.
How many seats are you?
We're 1285.
And Donna Lynn just heaved a sigh.
I know. It's like, for every 3 performances that she does, it's one of our shows, basically, more or less, So, and believe me, there's times when I wish I only had 385 because then I'd be a full house, you know.
Especially in the last year, yeah.
Right, you know. So there's pluses and minuses there, but yeah. So we're expected to make 80% of the money back only in ticket sales, and the remaining 20%, that's the delta that the city rather underwrites, and that's their contribution to the arts. And again, I think it's wonderful that they do that. And of course, we wish every city did that, but it's they're very proud of that's their contribution to the arts. And one of the things I asked them when I interviewed for the job was I said, well, who's writing that check? Is it federal money? Is it state money? Because I mean, I worked in ran a theater in Connecticut, and I know that there was at one time a very healthy state support. There was healthy state support in grants and money, and it kept going down and down and down and down. So I didn't want to get into that situation again. And they said, no, we don't rely on federal money. We don't rely on state money. It's our own money. It's guaranteed. What we tell you it's going to be, it's going to be. So that was a relief. And they've been very good. They've been very supportive. I got to say, the city council, everybody at the city manager, they've been extremely supportive of everything we've been trying to do. And it's through their largesse.
Let me ask you a very practical question. What percentage of tickets of your capacity do you have to reach in order to meet that requirement of making 80%?
You mean in terms of the overall capacity?
Well, let me ask a different question. You said that it's 80% of ticket sales and only ticket sales. Nothing to do with donations, nothing like that.
There are donors, but it's fractional. You know, you really have ticket sales. There's no fundraiser. There's no annual appeal. Nothing like that.
It sounds like magic to me. Did you study at Hogwarts?
No, but I will say, but the pressure to sell those seats is intense. You know, you really have to sell seats. You know, and that's where the marketing becomes important. And we've partnered with JCA, Jacobson Consulting in New York, to do an analysis of our trends, and that's been, and we meet with them every week, to go over dynamic pricing. We can get into all that later, how we do it, but it's been a huge help to be more data driven in the years since I've been here.
So, and make a mental note that I want to ask you about their marketing later, because I want to cover a few other things right now. I think that's a pretty good look at structure. So thank you guys for that. Let's talk about programming. How do you pick the shows that you pick? Now, BT, I know I have a lot of people in this room who don't write musicals. Well, I have a couple people in the room who don't write musicals, and everybody always wonders, whether there's room for non-musicals in certain regional theaters. Goodspeed, I don't know of anything that you've done that hasn't been a musical.
No.
It's in your name.
It's in the name.
Yeah.
Only produce musical theater. And, we ask ourselves sometimes, is this wise? But we only produce musical theater.
Yeah, you could possibly find a non-musical that would have a lower budget and bring in the equal amount of tickets, so you have a higher profit. Just saying.
I'm not saying we won't ever, but yeah, so far.
I know Paper Mill has sort of started putting like one. Paper Mill sort of programs the way you do, BT at Mirada. I think you do one non-musical in every season.
Generally, we try to, yeah.
So tell us about that. What is the thinking behind your programming? How do you find the shows? How do you decide what shows?
Well,
and most of all, for both of you, is everybody wants to know whether you do original musicals.
We have done original musicals. We're doing one this season, in fact. But when I got here, one of the things that I did when I got here was to institute the idea of the audience survey, the annual audience survey. We do it in the fall. And we do it in two ways. We do it in-house, where people come in and they fill out their ballot. They fill it out on pencil, they give it to an usher. And then we have a team that tabulates the results into a spreadsheet, which is labor intensive, but the only way to do it. And then we send another version out online to all the patrons. And it's very interesting because the in-house results are different than the online results, because the in-house results are mostly from subscribers, and the online results are mostly from single ticket buyers. And you see the difference in which titles they want. What we look for is the sweet spot where the same title is high on both lists.
Do you have any thoughts about what the difference is? What makes them one audience attracted to one thing and the other audience attracted to something else?
Yeah, the single ticket buyers usually are interested in new titles, more recent titles. The subscribers are interested in the older titles, more or less. That's, more or less how it breaks down. The single ticket buyers are willing to take a risk on something new or unknown. The subscribers like what they know. Interestingly, when it comes to the plays, they'll generally go for a play that has been a movie. They know the title. It's very title driven. In fact, one time we put on there Dead Poet Society, which was done as a play, I think very briefly. I think it was CSC that did it. It hasn't been done since. You can't even get it licensed except for Europe. Anyway, that was high on the list because they'd heard of it. They didn't even know it was a good play. They didn't even know that it had not gotten very good reviews in New York. All they knew was that's a title I know, and that's the title we did. So I think it's very title driven. But we do look for which ones are high on the list, and it actually came in handy for us at one point because we were going to do a new musical called Stormy Weather, at the last minute, Leslie Uggams, who was the star,
So
pulled
this is the Stormy Weather that was done at Amos.
I don't think it. I don't know that it is. It might have been a different one.
I thought that was, and that's
May have been.
Lena Horne's story.
Lena Horne. I don't know if it's the same child. I don't know if it's the same author, but in any case, Sheldon Epps was to direct it. It was all set up, all cast. And then a month before, she decided not to do it. So we said, okay, we quickly have to replace it. What are we going to do? Well, fortunately, we had this list. We had the survey. We knew exactly what to do. We didn't have to guess. We looked at bam, that's it. Murder on the Orient Express. We were the second production in the country. We kept Sheldon. We did it like that. So that's an example where the survey was useful because we already knew what the audience was interested in terms of what our next production could possibly be.
So Donna, at Goodspeed, you do a mix of tried and true musicals, and there's always something new that pops in there almost every season.
Yeah, we do that, and I'm so glad that you know that because our audience continually is surprised by that. Why are you doing all these new musicals?
I've been your audience for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
They're almost every year.
Yeah. So yeah, we do. Good new work has been part of Goodspeed's DNA almost from the very beginning. Somebody put a comment in about Man of La Mancha premiered at Goodspeed in 1970, whatever. Someone in here will remind me what that year was. So yeah, it's part of our DNA. We do original new musicals. We have by Jim Stenborg. Good to see you here. Sorry, I'm not supposed to do that to your podcast.
No, that's fine.
Okay. But
it makes people want to be in the room. It's the personal touch.
We had 2 new musicals on our stage in this pandemic recovery season. One on our stage right this minute. So
Anne of Green
Gables, and a musical adaptation of Christmas in Connecticut, the Warner film Christmas.
I'm very interested in that.
On our stage right now. Well, you have another week and a half to get here.
I'm not going to get up to Connecticut.
But our audience, much like BT's, and we have collaborated with La Mirada over the years. I think our audiences, in terms of what they enjoy and look for, is probably not very.
What do you mean by collaborated?
I know at least one show that we did a co-pro of.
Yeah, Happy Days. Happy Days. I know came. Yeah, that was one.
I think there was another one that I'm blanking on at the minute, but yeah. So they're
well, how smart of me to put you on a panel together.
Yeah, I know. I thought you did it on purpose. Title driven, of course. Even something like Anne of Green Gables and Christmas in Connecticut, I feel fairly confident in programming because I understand the quality of the work at the outset, but I also know it's new work that has a title that our audience is going to respond to. But moving forward, we are finding some success in programming and producing somewhat more progressively. Our audience is definitely returning to us. I knock all the things when I say that, but we've been very, very encouraged this past year with how our audience is coming back to us with what they're saying about what we are producing and how we are producing it, how we are representing artists on stage and off stage. And we feel that is going to result in a growing audience for us. It certainly seems to be what's happening. So just in terms of how we program, I feel like it's always shifting, I mean, I've been watching this happen for 35 years and it's always shifting, but I feel like it's shifting very rapidly now to a time where I think our audience is going to be a little bit more less risk averse than they may have been in the past.
I thank you for that, because basically we in the theater, we writers and all of us aspiring people depend on the regional theaters to start making new works normalized for audiences. Otherwise, we have no place to put our work.
Well, and I hope, you know, of course, none of us would have, as BT said, none of us would have wished the pandemic. But I think it gave us, in Goodspeed's his experience, it has given us an opportunity to lean into some risk, because we didn't know who was coming back to us, if they were coming back to us. But it seems as though the audience that is coming back to us is less risk averse.
That's very encouraging to hear. I think that probably does everybody in the room's heart good. Let me ask you this. I can't get the words. So you go on. I'll think about how I want to phrase this. So, oh, I know what I wanted to say. I want to say about didn't you originally conceive of the Trellis Theater as being more for development of new works?
Yeah, the Terrace Theater came about almost exclusively for new work development.
Yeah.
It's been open since 1985. Michael Price was producing new work in our rehearsal studio, and there was no place for anybody to park, and the town complained. So he went and found another space and turned it into a theater. And it has almost exclusively since then been new work, and primarily new work that people had never heard of before, you know, titles that people didn't know, writers that were completely new to our audience, some more established writers working down there, but an awful lot of brand new work, really emerging writers produced at the Terrace.
Look, I get it's the Terrace, Norman Terrace.
Norman Terrace, yes.
I get it wrong. 20 years I keep getting it wrong. So I just want everybody in the room to understand that when we were originally talking about programming with new works and being a little audiences being less risk averse, or we were talking about the main stage.
We were talking about the Goodspeed Opera House stage, and we do have the second stage where we have a smaller audience, but an audience that is definitely very willing to engage with something they know absolutely nothing about.
Well, over the years, ideally, I've tried to see one main stage and one Norman Theater, the Norman Theater. I'm so bad. Oh my goodness. By the way, I'm also on Benadryl. Can you tell?
I couldn't tell. No.
Oh, good. So, BT, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about in terms of bringing new works into La Mirada?
No, I want to echo one thing that Donna said, which was that we did find recently that our audience is a little more progressive and accepting than we thought. We just did A Few Good Men, and when we do a play here, usually works best if it's a large play, because it's a big house. And I found that, you know, you want plays that fill the space thematically and also in terms of size.
This is an interesting bigger conversation about the plays that used to be off-Broadway plays that are being thrust onto large stages now.
Yes, yeah. So, and we're fortunate in that way. We're one of the largest stages in the area, so we can do those plays. So that's kind of how we would, you know, separate ourselves from the other very good, you know, non-musical theaters here, like South Coast Rep. In any case, we did A Few Good Men, and there's some objectionable language in there. And at our first preview, there was one word, and I don't want to say what it was, but it's in the film. But when you heard it live, the whole thing, and I said, we should really take a look at this. And amazingly, then Tom McCoy, who is sort of is a partner of ours that the city hires on multi-year contracts to as a vendor to produce the plays in a sort of executive produced line produce the plays, made a curtain speech in which he warned everybody about the salty language that they'd be hearing. And you know something? We didn't get a single complaint. And so it really, our press rep said, he said, if this goes off and you don't get complaints about all the, the language, and we're in a very conservative area. So if if somebody says, oh, Jesus Christ, or damn, you'll get letters, I'm resigning my subscription forever. That didn't happen. And it said to us, maybe we can be more progressive than we've been in the past. So I think, her experience and our experience is encouraging, and that people are maybe it's what they're seeing on the streaming services, maybe, but it does seem to lead us to believe that, we can be a little more progressive in our programming.
Yeah,
Well,
we're
that's great.
very
That's
much
great to hear.
same situation.
That's really great to hear. That is. Let's move.
Bob, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to take those or not.
Is the composition of the two Goodspeed theaters audiences different from each other, age and demographics? Do you know?
They are. We do know. The Terrace audience is generally younger, more diverse, although moderately so. And from actually, interesting, a little bit of a tighter geographic area than the Opera House audience, which is the large majority of them are between 54 and 80, and predominantly white, and actually come from a much larger geographic area.
Well, that's actually an interesting question you bring up right there. Both Goodspeed and La Mirada, are you doing any kind of outreach work to try to bring in more diverse audiences? It's difficult enough here in New York, I know, but I think we all are. One thing that Shutdown has done, besides made us aware of COVID, it's made us aware of the mess our country's in, yes, and the need for change. Do you have anything that you're doing that try to encourage?
It's simply put, in addition to EDI work that we're doing internally with our staff and our board, we just went ahead and started programming through a more progressive lens, and casting and hiring creative team members through a more progressive lens, and with the mandate to make sure that we were bringing more voices to the table. And what we are seeing is that our audience, the face of our audience is shifting. It's slight, it's going to take some time. We are also in whitest white Connecticut, but we're seeing it shift. And I will share that two of our, we have several Black actors in the show that we're doing right now, but two of them had a conversation, shared that they had a conversation in front of the building a couple of weeks ago with a Black family who shared that they had come to see 42nd Street because they saw themselves represented on stage in materials that we put out. And they had come back to see Christmas in Connecticut because they trusted that they were going to see themselves represented on stage. And that's sort of a seismic shift for Goodspeed.
That is.
And something I'm really, I was so thrilled to hear, and that we have made the commitment to continue to lean into.
We had a Broadway season this past season where they brought in 7 shows by Black writers, predominantly Black producers, and it was a major news item, which it shouldn't have to be, but it was a huge story. It was mixed though. The success was mixed. I think those plays did bring in the audiences that everybody else says, why can't we get these people to come to see our shows? And the answer is always because they're not about them.
Right. Or they don't see themselves in them.
They don't see themselves, exactly. So that's something that we have had to become much more aware of. As if a pandemic wasn't enough to deal with, we had to deal with all that incredible racist nonsense that was going on in our country. So let's move away from that for a second, and let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about COVID. Why not?
Because I haven't today.
What?
I haven't talked about COVID today.
We need to do that. We gotta tick that box. We gotta
check that box. Yeah, we really do. Basically, what I want to know, what I think people are interested in knowing is how did you make the shift? How did you pivot? What did you do? I know that your two theaters took very different routes. I think you took opposite approaches.
Did we? So at Goodspeed, while our executive director at the time and our board of trustees were managing all the things they had to manage about how we sustained Goodspeed financially through certainly the first 6 to 9 months of that nightmare before the SBOG funding became a light that we were all going to look to. We pivoted online. I was the producer at the time and wasn't involved in a lot of those day-to-day finance scenarios that were being spun out about what we were headed into and headed further into. And so we created several online engagements. No idea whether or not our audience was going to come with us, but we wanted to try to keep some people working. And so we created 2 weekly, I think we did them weekly, online engagements. One of them that looked back at past shows, we titled it Great Speed, Aren't We Pithy? And we invited artists who had worked on a particular production onto the Zoom with us and shared B-roll footage of productions and talked about the creation of the productions. It turned out to be pretty wildly popular. And alongside that, because we did not want to drop our commitment to new work during the pandemic, and the artists who were reeling and writers who had so many projects that got put on the back burner during that time, we created another program that was focused on the work that I get to do every day, to talk to writers, to keep in touch with writers, to do online readings, to keep in touch and continue the development work on new work throughout the pandemic. So every week we'd have a different team, or in some cases another development entity onto the program to introduce our audience to a new work in development, or in the case of something that we maybe had developed before, to update them on something that we had in development before. And we found that our Terrace audience went more to the new work, and the Opera House audience went more to the Great Speed programming, but it was really successful. And we hear still in the office how people really hung on to those programs that gave them the opportunity to stay engaged with us.
What was the format that you used? Were people in isolation on Zoom, for instance?
Yeah, people were in isolation on Zoom.
Okay,
yes.
so I want to do a shout out to you for the benefit that you did. I think it was 2021.
It was October of 2020. Yeah.
2020. Okay,
Yeah.
It was beautifully done.
Thank you.
You had a couple of advantages. You had a great space for shooting,
Yes.
and you must have had a very good cameraman. You had a director of photography, or
you
something.
know, we brought in the team, a local couple who have a local video company. They do our B-roll and they do our archives, so they understand what we're about, but they're not, like high-end show capture people. They're just our videographers who know us, and our resident sound person captured all the sound for that. We took it, we recognized that this building is a big part of our identity, and what we wanted to feature the building in the event. So for people who may not know what we're talking about, we produced a gala called Shaking the Blues Away that was staged entirely within our building. Rashida Scott did a beautiful opening number on the grand staircase, and there was a tap dance number that moved from the porch.
Luckily you had a husband and wife couple.
Yes,
so they were able
right.
to do. That's how you do a duet. You have to.
That's how we did
find
it.
2 people who live together.
That's right. Every number was a solo except for that tap number that we had a couple in, and Clea Blackhurst sang a beautiful song perched on the bar. It was just really a wonderful experience for us.
It was a terrific. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
And everybody, and you followed COVID protocols.
Oh yes,
completely. And you also had testimonials from great people. All these wonderful stars came in and said nice things about you.
Yeah, it was lovely. We had a great time doing it. Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing that. I thought I was very impressed by it. BT, your theater made slightly different choices, as I recall.
Yeah, we didn't follow the conventional wisdom, not because we wanted to be contrary, just because it didn't make sense for us. But I think a lot of theaters, and I'm sure Donna Lynn was in her own group like this, where a bunch of fellow theater companies in the area would have a weekly meeting, and us in Pasadena Playhouse and other theaters in our area, the artistic directors would get on every week and we'd chat and we'd talk about what are you doing, and it was really a great resource. I'm sure Donna Lynn had the similar group, and people feeling your pain and getting it through it with you. In any case, a lot of theaters said, you have to, do the online stuff, send emails, let your patrons know you're there, don't let them forget about you, et cetera, et cetera. And, we're actually a very small full-time staff. We're only 7 to run this whole thing. So we said we don't have the bandwidth to do that. And we're going to make a different choice. We're going to look inward. We're going to use this time to address a lot of things that we've been talking about doing. And that's what we did. And we did not send emails to our patrons at all. We had no contact with them pretty much whatsoever during COVID. And we just trusted that after, 45 years, when we come back, they will come back. And that was a risk that we took perhaps, but we spent that time, as I say, we renovated our rehearsal hall and did other things here and, marketing and whatnot. Anyway, all those things that we did, we were very busy. And to the city's credit, they kept everybody on full time, even the box office, person, and we have a full-time technical director and lighting person and sound person for the shows that we do, but we weren't doing shows, but they kept everybody on. We repurposed them.
Well,
and,
I think it's wonderful. The box office person during a COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah, and we everybody was busy. We repurposed everybody.
Okay.
And they were very they didn't just go home. No. And that was the other thing, is you had to show up every day. There was no working from home. You had to show up every day. That was part of the deal. But it's a big facility, so it was fine. We all have our own offices. Anyway, so we looked inward. We focused on things that we wanted to get done that we had not had the time to get done, and we came back and we did a full season. It was 2019 again. Starting in September of 21. We did a full season, a full complement of shows. We were the first theater back in LA. Some of them waited until October, November, but we just went at it right away, and they came back. We didn't have any drop off, as it turns out.
No drop off at all. Not even like a 2%.
In fact, I think I may have showed you in another sort of strange happening. We ended up actually breaking.
I'm telling you, he studied at Hogwarts.
I know I did, but that season that we did after COVID, one that we just wrapped up in June, ended up being the highest grossing season of all time and the best attended of all time. So we broke the attendance and revenue records that year. Just it's how it worked out. I'm sure there's no one reason for that, obviously, but we were as surprised as anybody that was the case.
But I will share. We actually, I think I've got this right. We sold more tickets this season. Our season is January, December.
The calendar year, yeah.
Than we sold in 2018. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
I know.
I would like to think it's because people were so hungry to go back to theater. But let me ask you something else about getting them back into the seats. What were your COVID protocols? And Donna and Lynn, I do want you to touch on theater in the parking lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll go there and try to be quick. So we were so anxious to get back to work, and really we were very concerned about the loss of habit and that we needed to stay in touch. So we were so anxious to get back to work that we actually produced in August, September of 2020, we produced a concert out on the lawn. I think we did about 4 weekends of it. At that point, Connecticut protocols, because we're very liberal here in Connecticut, and we took it very seriously. And Connecticut protocols were even outside, you had to be 15 feet from another party. So we were so desperate to produce theater that we did a concert on the lawn, 4 weekends of it. A wonderful group called, and I'm going to blank on their names, but I'll think of it and put it in the chat. They do bluegrass covers of show tunes. That's how crazy we were.
Bluegrass covers of
4 guys with their string instruments outside doing bluegrass covers of show tunes. And hey, guess what? People came. And
I want to hear them do Guinevere from Camelot.
Wait till you hear from Wicked.
Defying Gravity.
Defying Gravity from Wicked. Yeah, that was pretty brilliant. Anyway, and so what Bob's referring to is that in the summer of 21, we programmed a full summer of theater, concerts and theater under a tent in our parking lot, because the parking lot was the biggest place that we had to put up a tent. And so we put a 60 by 100 foot tent on our parking lot, outfitted it with all the things we needed to outfit it with. And
which is where I met you.
A whole summer of really great concerts. We did some new work. We developed a new musical outside under the tent. it was really
Little Girl Blue, for those of you who remember Rashad, who's been with us,
That's right.
our good friend Rashad Chambers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was there. That's where we
That's
met.
where we met. That's
Yeah.
where we met.
We
And
met
then
in the parking lot.
That's
That should be a song.
COVID protocols, when we reopened in the theater in September of 21, we did mask required. You had to show your vax card, mask required, and we left 2 seats between each party. Of course, that is no way to run a business. And as we came back into this year, we did away with the distance seating and the vax checks, and we held on to masks. We were ready to drop our masks for the second show of the season, and we had a spate of COVID cases in rehearsal, and everybody got a little freaked out. So we kept our mask on through the halfway point in the season, and prior to opening 42nd Street, we said, okay, no masks. Masks optional.
My point of view is
encouraged.
My point of view is that audiences should be masked when they go to the shows, so that the actors don't get infected.
Yes,
Which
well,
keeps
one,
happening.
Yeah, that was one school of thought, and I think that was what drove us to go ahead and keep the mask on when the company had already been hit hard with a round of infection.
For commercial theater, one of the things that's increased costs, other than COVID protocols, is the need for understudies. All Broadway shows now have many more understudies than they would have had in any other time of our history.
Yeah, we responded that way too. We brought in, for the first 3 shows of the season, we had an extra set of swings and we're not doing it right now. It's a small show, and it's a little bit easier to move people around within the one that we're doing right now. But and we have no vaccine check, no masks. We're back to normal in that regard.
My board wants me to do a vaccine check and masks Tuesday night at a town hall in a 60-seat theater. So I will do it. BT, how about La Mirada? When did you reopen, and how did for both of you, were there any additional expenses? Obviously there were additional expenses because of the COVID testing. So you have your budgets did increase because of COVID.
Yes, our budgets did. Yes, primarily it was testing. It was testing and these additional bodies that we needed to bring in to make sure we could keep
and the COVID protocol officers that were required.
Oh yes.
Don't forget that.
Yep. How about you, BT? How did La Mirada respond?
Because we're owned by a municipality, we thought it was very easy for us to make up our minds about what to do, because we just said we're just following whatever the state or county requires. That's been our standard line. It's protected us as much as it can from a lot of criticism. However, there's no getting around the fact that even when you say that, the audiences think you're the ones making up the rules. So you get emails telling you that you shouldn't be listening to the deep state and fascism, and you got those emails. Then you got people saying thank you for doing it. It was really 50-50 in terms of the response. Thank you for doing it, or we're upset that you're doing it, but we just had to do it. So we checked vax cards at the entryway, and then you had to wear masks inside. The people who really took the brunt of that, though, I will say, were sometimes the box office folks, but really the ushers. Those front of house folks, those are the ones who had to check it and then argue with the people in the front. And, it was a tough time. And we took care of them at the end. We gave them a nice little bonus, because they were really the front line people when it came to that sort of thing. Fortunately for us, that lasted from September through April in our season, right? And then April 1st, the governor, who had come under a lot of criticism for his handling of the crisis and was almost going to be recalled, decided, something, it's over. It's 2019 again. There's no vax checking, no mask, nothing. And fortunately, that was April 1st. And then 3 weeks later, we opened one of our big productions, family productions, and that was a huge help to us. But I think the sentiment here is that audiences don't want to go back to that, but we encourage masking. We encourage it, and you can do it, and we have them for you. And we let everybody make their own decisions about that.
I will add, Bob, we've been testing twice a week since September of last year. We just dropped that Thanksgiving week. So when people came back for Thanksgiving, we switched to 1 test a week. We have a bubble, we have a production bubble. So if you come in contact with the actors, you're in that testing bubble and you have to remain masked when you're with the actors, who are, of course, the only people who can unmask other than the audience. And that has been, of course, expensive. But I think has been key to, I'm going to knock all the things. We have not lost performances to COVID yet. And I think
Wow.
it's been because of that pretty stringent protocol.
Wow.
Yeah. I was only referring to the audience, but similar to Donna Lynn's experience, the cast part of it, the production part, absolutely got more expensive with understudies for every show. The testing. I mean, there was one time that we were doing a run through, and I had not done the proper test. I couldn't even see the run through. But Equity was very strict about it, and so we just sort of followed their protocols as well.
I think Jane is asking for a little bit more than what you already gave us, Donna, because you touched on this. Has 2022 been as good as 2021 in terms of donations and support? Seems that many non-for-profits experienced surges in support during 2020 and 2021, but fall-offs in 2022.
We have not experienced, I'm knocking things again, we have not experienced a fall off yet. We are in the midst of renewal for 2023. We made a fairly aggressive push in our renewal communications for 23 for members, because we have a membership model that then rolls into a subscription model. So you become a member anywhere from $75 up to whatever you want to give. And that essentially you get exchange privileges for that $75 membership, exchange privileges, and you don't pay handling fees for that $75 membership for the season. And we have we've asked individuals, you were a $500 member, will you consider becoming a $600 member or a $750? And people are, I think we're finding like a third of our audience is actually responding favorably to being asked to give more. And we're also seeing still a lot of just surprise gifts that you go, where did that come from? Who, you have to actually go find out who that person is and what may have motivated them to give. And across the board, it is our programming and the way that we're producing it that is driving them to make the gift. So they're responding positively to the new Goodspeed.
That's great. BT, back to your history as in the class of spells and marketing magic. How did you market yourself to have done as well as you said you did coming out of COVID?
Well, again, it's all data driven, but one thing we did here, and one thing I will say is unique to this area, which I had because I was, on the East Coast for my whole career till I came here. But I remember Gold Star, a ticketing service you probably, some of you may even belong to, I had them give me a heat map of, our ticket sales. And I noticed that the heat map was strong, and then it would just stop. I'd say, what's this about? And I said, oh, that's where the freeway is. I said, oh, and I said, yeah, it's unique here. You have to sort of you have to get to learn that if you're from the East Coast, that it really drives what people do or don't do. And it's like a fence, on this side. So we, that was the first clue. Then the second thing we did was we worked with JCA, this Jacobson Consulting, to do a real in-depth study of where our patrons are coming from, heat maps, and we realized that we're strong here, but we noticed that it went out to a certain point, and that was it. And so we did further study, and we found out that within an hour's radius, which is pretty much all anybody in LA is going to drive if you're lucky, that we had almost 50% of folks either didn't know about us, but when they saw what we were doing, they said, but we're patrons of the arts and we'd like to go if we could find out more about it, which was highly encouraging. So we realized that for us, the way we were going to raise revenue was to look at the delta between where we were and our production costs and what would change that delta. And it's really about expanding our reach. So a lot of our focus has been about getting to those patrons who said, well, we didn't know about it, but we'd love to know about it, and we'd like to come, see what's there. And so we're really looking at our focus now is on new to file customers. I should also mention this I didn't mention this, but one thing that makes this also a little bit unique is that in addition to doing, we look like a typical regional theater. We do 5 musicals, each one runs a month. They're Equity, AFM, all that, SDC, all that. That is true. But we also present we do about 30 one-night shows. At Tony Bennett, Air Supply, whatever, country acts, and so, which I also program and manage. Those actually give us additional patrons that might not otherwise come here. They might not otherwise see a play. So you're capturing that information through the box office, and then it gives you more people to market to. And also, because now, say you're doing a country artist, you know, a big country artist. Now you're advertising on the country station, and all of a sudden these people are hearing about La Mirada Theater, which they wouldn't have otherwise heard about. So it's another way of getting the name of the organization out there, and they say, oh, what's that about? So it allows us to, you know, to expand our Rolodex, as it were, of potential patrons. And now the push has been to expand our reach. And as well, not which is to say you don't want to also nurture the people you have, but if you can see, because of those borders I talked about, you really have to focus on what's going to be within that 1 hour radius. And occasionally you'll get the stray person who comes, you know, 3 hours to see your production or whatever because it's their favorite show. But Dick Van Dyke, by the way, showed up to see Ain't Misbehavin' because it's his favorite show.
Wow.
Who knew, right? Now, I'm not saying he drove 3 hours, but I'm just saying, you know, that's what happens. So for us, like I say, it's been about expanding our reach and trying to fill in that heat map so we're really dense within our 1 hour radius.
I will share that we are experiencing a tremendous increase in Nudophile as well, which is so encouraging. I have to assume that it made people in our region think about the value. I mean, in our case, I think I assume that the pandemic made people think about the value of having Goodspeed in their community. And so they're stopping and taking time to say, no, I'm going to do that. And we're putting a lot of energy into recapturing those people and getting them back as well.
I muted myself. So congratulations to both of you.
We lost you.
No, I was typing a note to somebody and I put it on mute. We covered a lot in an hour. And I wish we had more time to keep talking about this, because I'm very interested in both of your success stories. I'm happy to have, randomly when I invite people to be on the show, I don't know what your finances are. I don't know what the financials are. I have no idea. And it sounds like both of you are successfully returned to live performance, which I think gives a lot of hope to a lot of people. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that. I know that, Donna, you have to run.
Yeah, I have dinner plans waiting for me, so I've got to run. But thank you for having me. It's great to have the opportunity to reflect, and to think about where we were and to reflect on where we've come. And just everybody keep up the good work. If anybody wants to reach out to me, it's just donna@goodspeed.org. You can find me there. And I look forward to staying in touch with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Thanks for having me. BT, we have to catch up soon.
We must.
Okay, we'll make that happen. All right. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, BT, give me just a second. I'm gonna wrap up and come back and
sure.
Spend a little time with you. So everybody, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for my audience. Thank you for people who are out there in podcast land and YouTube land. All of you are welcome to come be part of the room. If you want, just shoot me an email, trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And we'll put you on our Zoom list, and you can come and you can ask your questions in the room along with everybody else. We do this for free. This is a community service. We're a not-for-profit, but it is end of year. And for those of you who don't know, I think everybody knows, not-for-profits basically can take donations, end-of-year donations, anytime donations, and you get a tax deduction. It's tax deductible. So we're one of those companies. So if you like what we do and you want to see us keep doing it, consider making a donation. Go to truedonate.com, TRUdonate.com. That's truedonate.com. I appreciate all of the support that you show us just by being with us. And I would appreciate whatever the support you can show us as well. Financial, trudonate.com. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays. whether it's Christmas, Hanukkah, or whatever you celebrate. I hope it's filled with blessings and love. That's it. See you soon. Bye.